Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Zapersky. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into the world of elite consultants, where you'll learn the strategies, tactics, and mindset to grow a highly profitable and successful consulting business. Hey, it's Michael Zapersky, and today I'm very excited to have Tony Chatman joining us. Tony, welcome.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me.
So, Tony, for those who don't know you, just take a moment and explain what you do.
I'm two things. I'm a professional speaker, and then I'm really what's called a corporate relationship expert. And what that means is when organizations hire me, they're not trying to fix the processes or their products, but they're really focused on the people side of business. I help leaders become more effective, help teams become more effective. I especially work with groups when they're going through change and disruption. And I also deal with certain obstacles that keep organizations from being able to be connected, things like unconscious bias. That's often a dysfunction that keeps the relationships within the organization from being effective.
Terrific. Well, let's dig more into that because I know that you've worked with the U.S. Secret Service, Chase Bank, Estee Lauder, NASA, a whole bunch of others to really help people reach those new heights of effectiveness by what you call understanding themselves and others better. So just take a few moments here to really explain to us what that is and how do you do that?
Sure. When I first got into the business, I came in as a chemical engineer. I had very specific training that was very effective and useful in my industry. So I came into the business, even though I was coming in at the ground level, I had a running start. I'm ready to go. And very quickly, as I started taking on leadership positions, I realized that although I had a lot of technical training, that it was often the people side of business or the human dimension of business that was really determining whether an organization was successful or failing. Whether it was me being a good leader, I realized I'm trained on how to work with Fourier infrared spectrometer. That's what I do. Now I'm dealing with all of these different personalities and needs and wants and motivations. And I started to see that that's not what I was trained for. People are thrown into business being trained in very specific technical expertises, and yet they often don't have the skill set to be able to navigate the relationships. And being able to work in those areas, I've really seen helps people and groups and teams and whole organizations be able to make the jump to the next level.
So the audience listening to this is probably thinking, how does a chemical engineer become a corporate relationship expert? What did that path look like? How did you go about just taking that technical scientific background and then shifting it into the more of the corporate side? Like, did you go and get training? Did you just consume books and courses and then apply it? Like, what did that path look like?
It was a combination of all those things. After I started failing miserably as a leader, I realized I have to get help. And I had a really good mentor, and he pointed me in some specific directions in terms of books and workshops. But once I started doing that, I just began to go after it with this incredible appetite. I had to devour everything I could. I went to grad school, one of the top MBA programs in the world, actually. But as I was doing, my wife and I made a decision that we wanted to leave our corporate jobs and work in the area of nonprofit. And that was really where the learning curve began for me, because we worked in a faith-based nonprofit, and I was leading large groups of people, but at the same time, I was interacting with people at a very personal level. And I started to see certain patterns. It's one of those funny things. I view engineering almost like I view the Marines. Once you're an engineer, you're always an engineer, right? I realized I look at things in a very particular way that people who are not engineers don't. They just don't look at things that way.
And what is that? It's actually interesting you're mentioning this. Like, I've interviewed and I know many successful marketers and business owners who their background is as an engineer. So I'm interested to learn more about, like, what is it that you see or that you find that you're able to observe and to identify that others maybe overlook?
First, I look for patterns. Certain patterns make themselves very evident. But then once you have a pattern, I understand that the pattern is rarely as simple as it seems. Things work really well in a vacuum, right? Most of your formulas are made to be in a perfect situation. But then there's all of these outside factors that start to come in. And the same thing happens as I'm looking at things from an engineering standpoint. I'm able to say, okay, this works, but it works in this situation because of this. And it works in this situation because of this. And it does not work at all in these three situations.
Tony, can you give us an example of how you applied that then to your business or even in the early days of kind of leading that nonprofit?
Delegation.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I had to do, and one of the things many of your listeners have to do, especially if they're business owners and entrepreneurs, you get to this point where you can no longer run the company by yourself. You become the limiting reagent. You're the bottleneck. So you have to start hiring people. And so now you've got to bring in this whole team of people who you think, okay, I've got to have people who have my vision, have my dream, have my passion, but now I have to start offloading things to them, which is so hard to do when this is your baby. So most people say, okay, I have to start delegating. They have some very basic principles. Make sure you have buy-in, make sure you reward success, make sure you give feedback. But then I look at it and say, well, no, there's a process to this. And the process starts before you do anything, you have to make some basic assessments. As I started delegating and saying what was going right and what was going wrong, I said, well, for these people, I don't fully trust them. But it's not just that I don't trust them. It's on one of two areas. I either don't trust the fact that they're reliable, or I don't trust their basic knowledge, skills, and ability, with KSAs. If I don't trust they're reliable, that either means I don't trust that they're motivated, they have character issues. So I'm going to have to manage them differently as I'm delegating responsibilities to them. I'm going to have certain benchmarks. I'm going to go back and I'm going to check those benchmarks and make sure that they're actually following through on what they said they're going to do. So I'm going to be far more likely to regulate their progress. If I don't trust their knowledge, skills, and ability, then I'm going to have to actually develop them.
What I like what you're saying here, Tony, is really like this is a great example of approaching anything, our businesses or life, in a more methodical way, where I think most people in terms of hiring, they'd say, okay, well, yeah, I have this need and I need to go find someone to help me with it. And they would go and just kind of just try and find that person. But they wouldn't really think about how do I measure the success of that person and what are the different components or variables that based on what I see or what I need to look for, I might need to make adjustments. And so you're already kind of seeing a few steps ahead, whereas a lot of people just kind of go out and get things started, but they're not seeing as far kind of around the curve as you might be.
Yes, you're right. I'm trying to see around the curve, and I'm trying to go back and say, what were the components that are going to make him successful around the curve? Then how do I measure those components? Not just their success, because those are the building blocks to what's going to happen later. And if I fail at this first step, I'm done. I'm toast.
I think this is a really important point. And for everyone listening, this is a little bit different than what we often talk about on the podcast here. But this specifically, I think, is a really great example and an opportunity for all of us to look at how we approach our goal setting and measuring objectives and really charting out where we want to take our business and our success in our life and thinking about it through some additional filters and really kind of getting granular around, well, how do we measure success? And if we get this result, what do we then need to do? How do we approach it? Or how do we fix it? Or how do we optimize it? So this is really good. And I want to now come back to your story though, Tony, and because there's a lot that we can uncover here that will be of benefit for everyone. So you started this nonprofit. You've shared with us how you've kind of started to make this shift from being an engineer to leading others and figuring out how to improve leadership or how to work with people and start to develop a process around that. At what point did you then decide, okay, I'm now going to go out and become a consultant, start to speak and to work and to advise organizations around this area of relationships and leadership? I
burned out. I just burned out. I was overworked. If there's a problem with nonprofit, it's that it's non-profit. So I'm overworked, underpaid. My wife is working with me. She's starting out health issues. I try to go back to being a chemical engineer. Technology has passed me up. There's no way I can go back. I start a company with a friend, goes well for a while. I actually ended up training traders for a hedge fund, but the market changed. The US went to war. Everything's crazy. I find myself working a temp job for an engineering firm, and I realize within a week, I just can't do this. This is not who I am. And so in my mind, I'm going back and I'm trying to connect the dots. What are the things that I'm good at that made me successful along the way? The other thing I did is I pulled together a group of my closest friends. These were people who have known me for 8, 10, 12 years, professionally, personally, and they have a bit of influence. So we need to meet, we need to talk. I need someone to help me process this because I'm in the middle of it. I can't see it, but I need your help. And so I put together my own little advisory group. We met at a friend's house, and one of them just asked me the proverbial, Tony, if you could do anything in the world, what would it be? At the time, I was honestly thinking about business development. But because I had been connecting the dots, I almost reflexively said, gosh, if I could do anything, I get paid to speak. Didn't know that that was actually a business, but it just kind of came out. These are people who had seen me speak hundreds of times. They believed in me. 3 weeks later, I found myself in Bermuda opening for Les Brown, the motivational speaker. And that was really the beginning of it. And I got a taste. But then I had to go back and say, okay, that's great that I have the skill set to do this, but I don't know how to run this as a business. I took 11 months and worked for a seminar company. And I viewed it as going to grad school. I spoke 5 days a week in different cities, 3 weeks out of the month. And I was vetting out how accurate is the information that I have? How do I market? How do I sell? What resonates? What doesn't resonate? And at the end of 11 months, I walked away from that and really honed in on, here's what I'm doing, here's my focus, and this is my business.
So what did you take from that? I mean, 11 months of really living, breathing, having the benefit of seeing systems that are already working and figuring out how they could be improved and so forth. But when you then took that into starting your own business, let's kind of start. What was the first thing that you did to go out and get a client?
First, to back up, the thing about working with a seminar company is they give you a workbook, but it's really up to you to make it come alive. You may have 8 different modules. You get to decide how much time you spend on each module, what you emphasize, what you don't emphasize. And very quickly, I knew these are key triggers. And because I was getting feedback from certain managers within the group, I was immediately getting, here are my pain points. And it was a very clear pattern. I knew exactly what to do. I first started with my personal network. People that I knew that I had the skill set, but also that I knew would make a true business decision. I didn't want any favors. I didn't want any handouts. I just wanted to leverage my connections. And I began getting business that way.
What did that look like? Did you send an email to those people saying, hey, like this is what I'm doing, and you talked about how you could help them? Or did you suggest jumping on a phone call, or do you meet people in person? Like, just more specifically, what did you actually do to get those first couple of clients?
I met people in person as much as I could.
Okay. So these were more local people to you at that time?
They were local. Certain people I traveled to, and certain people I did call. This was before Zoom. There's nothing like, especially when you're breaking into the business, face-to-face. If you send an email, look, I don't even read my emails. Who reads all of their emails? No one has time to do that. What gets lost in an email is passion. And I knew if people could see my passion as well as my expertise, because as they could ask me questions, they're vetting me. They're trying to see, okay, how real are you, Tony? Is this a phase you're going through? Did you just read one book, or do you really know this? I know you've led before, but do you really know this? That put me into some very interesting circles, one in which I was at a Blue Ocean strategy meeting. Everyone in the room was a VP or higher for a Fortune 500 company. It was because I had been vetted now by people that I respected, and they said, I'm going to bring you into this circle, and now your network is expanding. It was very personal, but one of the phrases that came up quite often, because I build a lot of trust with people, was, Tony, I know 2 things. I know that, number 1, you take your reputation very seriously, and number 2, you would never do anything to hurt me or my business. And those 2 things got me in a lot of doors.
So those opened the doors for you, right? The relationships that you had and the network that you had kind of got you your first few speaking clients. What about today? I mean, what's working for you best at the moment in terms of your lead generation and creating new opportunities to work with clients?
For me, the number 1 thing is speaking breeds more speaking. If I speak at an event, if I give a workshop, I will normally walk away with at least 2 or 3 referrals for more business. It's the quality of what I bring. It is the connection that I make. And it's the relationship and the credibility that I bring throughout the entire process. So I'm very customer oriented throughout the entire process. I have an assistant, but I'm the one who's on the phone with people who want to hire me, or once they're hiring me, I'm the one who's making sure that they feel connected to me and not just connected to my company. And I can still do that at this level. The biggest thing is the more I get to speak, the more I get hired. And what that also does is it allows me to do more than just speak. For example, I had an organization hear me speak. They said, we actually need to change the entire culture of our organization. Can you help us do this? Because we have a harassment culture. We have 8,000 employees, and we need you to spearhead this. I could not have gotten that through an email. There's just no possible way. I couldn't have gotten that through a sales call. When they heard the legitimacy of what I was bringing, everyone else's response, and then were able to ask me specific questions, and I could quickly answer them, they felt that I was the person.
All right. So I want to find out how you're getting these speaking engagements in just a moment. But before that, are you doing anything during the talk that you're delivering that is helping you to generate leads? Is there like some kind of form that you pass out? Are you suggesting that people come up to you at the back of the room after the talk? What have you found that works best to actually help you to get people to come up to you afterwards or to inquire after the talk and where you're actually generating leads?
The first thing is, from stage, I literally say something to the nature of, look, many of you are looking to hire someone to come in and address something like this. Or I'll say, many of you know that your organization is looking to bring someone in. Don't you want someone that you know is credible, that's effective, and that's entertaining? Because what we don't want to do is sit through any more boring meetings, boring trainings, et cetera, et cetera. I'll often have a form there with them as well. And on the form, it's a follow-up form, but it's really a referral form. So the first part of it is, would you give me a testimonial? What'd you like best? What would you like to change? Truthfully, I don't even look at that. It's just there because it's there. But then afterwards, it's, do you know anyone who could benefit from this training? And please give me their contact information. Then I ask for their contact information if they're willing to give me that as well. If I have a room of 100 people, if I have that form, I'll probably have 12 to 15 names when I walk out. What I will next do is I will email the person who gave me the referral, and I'll ask them to introduce me, just connecting with them immediately. Because there's just a certain amount of credibility that if Michael refers me to Renee, and if you say, Renee, Tony's awesome, that's much different than me saying, hey, Michael gave me your number.
Definitely. And how do you collect those forms? Are you asking people to bring them up to you? Do you walk around? Does someone that's working with you go and pick them up? What's the actual steps you take to get those forms back? While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
I normally have someone with me, and I ask people to hand them to that person. And what that allows is it draws 2 lines. If walking out, everyone's giving that form to that person, people go, wow, I should really give that form. It's kind of a groupthink thing. It keeps me from getting blocked by people who want to come up and have a conversation, because there will also be a number of people who just say, here's my card. I want to hire you to do X. I was speaking in Atlantic City 2 months ago. I work for the State Department. I need you to do X. I work for Homeland Security. I need you to do X. And it was about 4 people just like that, all of whom have already hired me. I want to distinguish between that referral of someone else who, hey, I think this person could really benefit, versus I want to hire you myself. And I want that to be two distinct lines.
Very interesting. Yeah. I mean, this is a great example of really you're making an offer. You're letting people know, you're inviting them to become a client or to at least learn more, where I think these days so many people are concerned about being too salesy or too promotional or too strong. And so then they hold back completely for asking for anything or making a suggestion or providing an invitation to that prospective buyer. But if you don't ask, if you don't let people know that they're welcome to hand in a form or to reach out to you or to get in touch, then it's less likely they're going to. So this is a really great example here, Tony. So let's now go back to how do you get these speaking engagements? What are you doing? What's working best for you to actually land speaking engagements?
I struggle with that. I struggle with coming across as salesy, as self-promoting, as even narcissistic. I really wrestle with that. So my mindset is when I'm on stage, I give you everything I can give you. It's entertaining, but it is densely packed with actionable information. If you use these strategies, you will see a difference. When I come back, I feel very confident in saying, wouldn't you like me to replicate this for whoever I'm doing this for? I met with a social media influencer recently. He said, look, it's not about you selling, it's that you have something to share with the world. So whether it's my book, my CDs, or just me speaking, I feel that it's of a quality that it's really beneficial. And so in that way, it's easier for me mentally to ask for that because I don't feel like I'm just selling something for the sake of selling it. I'm selling it because if you implement this, your workplace will be better and you'll make more money.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's really what it's all about. It's providing value. It's about helping people to solve problems. If you saw someone come up to you and they were just completely dehydrated and you could tell that they weren't where they should be and you had a bottle of water or you could fill up a glass of water and offer it to them, you wouldn't not do that, being afraid of offending them or something. You would say, hey, here's some water. And if they drank that quickly, you probably would say, would you like some more? Because you know that it's going to benefit them. And so it's the same thing with our businesses. If we believe that we can really help someone and add value and solve a problem that they might have, then it's our responsibility to at least let people know. And it's their option whether or not to say yes to wanting to learn more about that and to engage. But if we don't make that offer, then we're doing both their business and their situation and them personally a disservice, and we're doing our business a disservice as well.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So let's come back then now. So how do you go out and get these speaking engagements? What have you found to work best? And maybe for someone who's listening to this that has been consulting for some time, they're very good at what they do, but they keep hearing from other guests on the Consulting Success podcast here, or they just know themselves that speaking can really help to grow their business. What should they do? How should they approach going out to get more speaking engagements?
2008, the recession hits. I lost all my clients. Back to ground zero. The first thing I decided was on an industry. I said, it's a recession. The federal government is the place to go during a recession. They print their own money, literally. And this was back the internet, but it wasn't the internet, not like it is now. I went to the library. I pulled out this book of associations and looked for as many federal association conferences as I could. And I contacted them because there still was an internet, obviously. I also Googled it. I said, okay, federal conferences. And certain ones came up. There's the National Conference for Blacks in Government. There's the National Conference for Federally Employed Women. There's all these conferences that come up. And many of them have a call for speakers right on their website. I looked at their call for speakers. I just started applying. I took my topics and I tweaked them for the federal government. And by tweaking them, it wasn't that I added the federal government as part of the wording. I didn't say leadership for federal employees. I did a little research. I said, okay, for the federal government, there's a thing called ECQs, Executive Core Qualifications. For a person to become an executive in the federal government, they have to meet these 5 standards. They have to be able to lead people, lead during change. They have to have a business acumen. They have to be results driven, and they have to be able to build coalitions. Those are 5 things. So can I take any of my topics and make sure that when a person reads this, they think this ties into that ECQ? So I started doing that. So when I applied within the federal space, they would look and they would go, oh, this is relevant to the development of our leaders. And it turns out that even when there's a budget issue, those 5 areas are actually mission critical. Even when there's no budget, there's a budget for those areas. I slowly began getting to speak at a couple of conferences. It became evident I learned more from speaking at the first 2 conferences than I gained in terms of business. I learned what I was doing wrong. I got lots and lots of feedback, and not just feedback forums. I talked to people afterwards. I hung out at the conference. I bought people drinks. I just went, what'd you think? What can I do differently? And they would say, okay, here's what you don't know about the federal space. And they would just tell me. That was a beautiful thing. At the same time, I also realized there are certain journals and magazines that people in the federal space read. And so what I would try to do is target them to write articles just to build credibility, because I didn't have any federal clients yet. Those two things started to build a little bit of a brand name. The next year when it came around and I was speaking at those very same conferences, it was this magical thing where now my breakout rooms are full because people remembered me from last year. They saw an article, they read something, they started inviting their friends to my workshops, and now I'm getting major business from it. The first year I got speaking engagements. I got a gig at the EPA, but the next year it was like the National Security Agency. It was the Secret Service. It was these high profile agencies that people actually came to my workshop just to vet me and see if they could bring me in to speak.
Tony, for those first few speaking engagements that you landed, were they paid? Did you do them for free? What did that look like?
Free. I came in and I spoke for free because I trusted in my speaking skills. There's no amount of writing a bio. There's no amount of writing an article. There's not even a good enough video that can capture what it's like to be in the room with me. And so I always have believed, if I can get you in the room and I have a microphone, I got you. I was willing to speak for free. And even today, I'll target 8 to 10 events that I'll speak at for free, but they're my choice. And I go with the specific intent. For example, now I'm trying to get more non-government business. So this year I targeted very specific events that I'm willing to speak at, some at full fee, some at minor fee, some at no fee, because I'm more interested in building the brand in that industry.
And at what point did you recognize and decide to make the switch from just saying yes to free, where you're providing speaking engagement, talk to someone without any compensation, to saying, okay, well, yeah, I'm only going to now take on or go after paid speaking gigs?
Here's what I'd say. Within 6 months, I started to be able to tell which events, if I spoke at for free, could bring in money and which events were a waste of time. That's why I say it's my choice. I always have someone say, hey, can you come speak at my event for free? It's great exposure. And my response is, people die from exposure. And I get what they need to do. I totally understand it. But for the most part, people have a budget. They really do. And so me having confidence of saying, I know you have a budget, changes the game.
What I've found in the speaking engagements that I've had over the years is that even sometimes when someone says they don't have a budget initially, when you come back and if you're wanting to generate direct revenue from that actual talk, coming back and just letting them know, well, I can't do this for free, but what is your budget or what can you make work? That often has resulted in, oh yeah, well, actually we have $5,000, I guess, that we could put towards this. We weren't planning to, but it certainly seems like this would make sense. And so sticking kind of to your ground or deciding what works for you and what doesn't work for you, I think is very important. And then the other thing that you're really mentioning here, and I hope is coming across for everyone, is that speaking, even if you're not receiving direct compensation from it, it's like marketing. It puts you in front of your ideal clients in a very powerful way that allows them to see you and to really start receiving value and having kind of that trust and that relationship and that rapport building up, so they're a lot more comfortable. And that then leads, as you've clearly demonstrated here, Tony, to engagements on the back end, into workshops or consulting engagements that then come from the speaking.
Yes, absolutely.
Another question here for you is, as you're going to all these different conventions and conferences and you're giving talks and you're walking out of the room with piles of paper, with people that are interested, and then you're getting inquiries afterwards, I would imagine that you have a fair bit of potential lead flow. You have this pipeline with a lot of different contacts in it. How are you managing that? What have you found to work best for you to stay top of mind for all these people? Because I'm sure not everyone that becomes a contact in your database is ready to buy from you at this exact moment. So what are you doing to ensure that they're thinking of you, and that even though they may not buy right now, that they might then want to buy in a few weeks, months, or years down the road?
I hired an assistant first. I realized I don't have the bandwidth to do it all. And so I hired an assistant who actually has a background in building sales funnels and helping work CRMs and all of that stuff. I was more worried about that than someone who could organize my emails. Lately, I've experimented with the text to opt-in. That's really hit or miss. I've had some where I had 100% opt-in. I've had others where I've had 10%, and it just seems hit or miss. One of the things that I've really liked doing, and I can do this now easier with an assistant, is to say, if you give me your business card, I will email you some form of notes for this workshop. And also, we're going to do a drawing. The drawing will often either be, I'm going to give away a free book. Let's say I'm speaking at a conference. We did this in Kansas City, where I spoke 8 times over 5 days. So there was this huge market that was next to the convention center that everyone went to eat at. So I just went to the owner and said, hey, can I ask you a question? Would you be willing to give me 10 gift cards that I would basically give away to audience members? But in doing so, I'm going to promote your establishment. Sure, absolutely. No brainer. Didn't blink. Would have given me 50 if I'd asked him. It was just like, I said, dude, I'm going to have, look, I'm doing this 8 times. I'm going to have 200 people in my room per shot, and I'm going to send them here. Can you give me 10 gift cards? Yep, got it. Hey, at the beginning, my assistant would pass this thing around, say, hey, if you guys put your business card in this bowl, hat, makeshift, whatever, we're going to auction off a gift card to one lucky winner. And we're going to opt you in. We're going to give you a copy of the notes because many of you are going to have to go back and report back what you've learned, and you're going to be opted in to get more information. People loved it. 8,000 names later, that's kind of how I built that part of the list. Now, my assistant really helps me do my monthly newsletter, which I'm trying to convert to text. I think people aren't really reading the emails. The open rate's kind of low, and that's really the trend right now. So I'm figuring that part out. But more importantly, there's a huge difference between my casual contacts, my referred leads, and my hot leads. And I really break them into those basic 3 categories. So my hot leads, I'm on them. I'm emailing them personally. We're having discussions. I'm actually now doing this thing. I'm not just sending them emails, but I'm sending them emails of me giving them a personalized video. So I'll shoot a video for them, and I'll have a sheet of paper with their name on it. So this is to mark. Far greater likelihood that they're going to open that video, and far greater likelihood that they're going to listen for 2 minutes versus read 500 words. That's really how I'm managing it right now. It's still a work in progress. I know that I've got money slipping through the cracks in a few places, and I'm trying to patch those up.
Yeah, but it's good that you've made that decision to bring someone on to help you in that area, because I think far too often people hold off on that. They think I can just do it myself. It'd take too long to train them. They're not going to get it right. It's going to cost me money. But they're not seeing the investment side of it that, as you just mentioned, right, there's so much money slipping through the cracks typically. And a great way to start plugging those holes is to figure out what are the real priorities and what could I be doing better, or what by filling some of those things will then allow us to start accumulate a lot more opportunities.
Absolutely. That was huge for me because honestly, I was making very good money by myself. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. I knew to get to where I wanted to get to, and to really spread my message out farther, I was getting in my own way and I had to bring someone else on.
What is the biggest contributing factor to that? If you could mention kind of one thing that really stands out to you.
Other than I really believe I'm good at what I do, I know my marketplace. I know what's hot. I know what the price points are. People give me input. You should raise your pricing. I can in this market. I know my marketplace. And because I've been building in this marketplace for a long period of time, I have a strong enough brand that I have traction. I stayed with this marketplace for 8 years, where others have jumped ship. It's allowed me to have enough of a name that I can just stay here and be known.
Great tips, Tony. Really appreciate you coming on the show here today. And I want to make sure that people can learn more about your work, see what you're up to, and to connect. So what's the best place for people to go to learn more about you?
Well, you can go to my website, www.tonychatman, and that's CHAT as in Tom, MAN.com. Facebook, Tony Chatman. Twitter, Tony Chatman. Instagram, Tony Chatman Speaks, because someone beat me to that one.
There you go. Yeah.
LinkedIn, Tony Chatman. I'm easy to find.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to have all that linked up in the show notes. And I think you have some great resources on your website as well, Tony. So we'll make sure that people can find those. Again, thanks so much for sharing some of your story here, your journey, and especially around some of these tips of how you've gone on to really build a thriving business. For anyone very interested in getting involved in speaking to grow their consulting business, there's some real gems in this episode. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. For more episodes and to subscribe, rate, and leave a review, head on over to iTunes. And if you'd like to develop consistent lead flow and a highly profitable consulting business, learn more about our coaching programs at consultingsuccess.com.